Greetings, curious minds, and welcome once again to the All Sorts podcast. This is your place, your portal, really, for tackling the planet's most, well, perplexing puzzles and fascinating insights. If you're someone who's driven to understand the world, if you love those aha moments that just cut through the complexity, well, you found your harbor.
Absolutely.
Our journeys here are really just beginning, so please help us fuel these expeditions. Like, share, and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast right here on YouTube.
Yeah, do that.
And definitely chart a course through our back catalog. Loads of great deep dives there. And join the conversation over on X, Instagram, and Threads.
So today on the All Sorts podcast, we're diving deep, really deep, into the world of a, well, frankly, enormous warship, the Kirov-Class Battlecruiser.
Exactly. And this is perfect for you, our listener, because we know you appreciate getting a solid grasp on big topics like this, the history, the current status, all the debates, but, without getting bogged down in overly technical jargon. Think of this as your expert guided tour. We've done the legwork, sifted through the sources to pull out the most crucial and, frankly, most fascinating bits about these giants of the sea.
Yeah, our mission today is pretty clear. We want to explore where the Kirov class came from, how it evolved, take a hard look at where it stands now in the Russian Navy, and really wrestle with the whole cauldron of its relevance today. Modern naval strategy, Expect some maybe surprising facts along the way, stuff that might make you rethink these ships.
Okay, sounds good. Let's kick off with something that seems, well, more complicated than you'd think. What do we actually call these things? Our sources suggest there's a bit of a naming debate.
There really is. Officially, if you ask the Soviet or Russian Navy, they'll tell you it's a heavy nuclear-powered guided missile cruiser. Quite a mouthful, but descriptive.
Yeah, tells you what it does.
Exactly. But then, when the first one, the Kirov, showed up on NATO's radar, they just called it Balkami, Baltic Combatant Eye.
Balkami.
And then, because they're just so massive, so obviously bristling with weapons, a lot of Western commentators started calling them battle cruisers.
Battle cruisers.
Yeah.
That term definitely carries some historical weight, doesn't it?
Right.
Thinking back to, World War I and Jutland.
It does. And that's where the debate really heats up. Historically, a battle cruiser was, designed to be faster than a battleship, maybe give up a bit of armor for that speed, but still pack a huge punch.
Right, like a heavy cruiser hunter or something.
Kind of, yeah. Or to scout ahead of the main fleet. But trying to apply that exact definition to the Kirov class today, well, naval rules have changed so much. The threats are different. It doesn't quite fit perfectly.
So what's the argument against calling them battle cruisers then? Just that the old definition doesn't map onto modern warfare?
That's a big part of it, yeah. The whole idea of a faster, less armored battleship counterpart, it doesn't really capture the Kirov's role or the way modern navies are structured. Those neat categories from the early 20th century have blurred,
Okay, that makes sense. But the name sticks around, especially in the West. Why? What's the reasoning for using the term?
Well, first off, just look at them. Their physical size is, frankly, staggering. They're bigger than pretty much any other surface warship out there, apart from aircraft carriers. We're talking World War I battleship size, almost. They absolutely dwarf other modern cruisers.
You mentioned 2 or 3 times bigger.
Easily. In size and in the sheer amount of weaponry they carry. That scale alone makes people reach for a term like battlecruiser.
You just can't ignore that size.
You really can't. And it's not just size. Their intended job during the Cold War was specifically to threaten U.S. carrier groups. That kind of major fleet unit role, designed to take on the enemy's biggest assets, echoes the historical battlecruiser mission, even if the tactics are different.
Okay. So the intended role plays into it, too.
Definitely. And interestingly, their appearance reportedly spurred the U.S. Navy to bring the Iowa-class battleships back into service in the 80s. That suggests the U.S. saw them as a comparable, strategic-level threat.
Wow. So even if not a perfect fit definitionally, the impact and scale kind of push it into that category.
Pretty much. It conveys the sense of power and significance, even if the historical role isn't a one-to-one match.
Okay, that clears up the naming puzzle quite a bit.
Okay.
So let's rewind. Where did these massive ships even come from? What was the initial idea?
Well, back in the 1970s, the Soviets were apparently quite worried about U.S. Navy submarines. Their capabilities were growing.
Right, a major threat.
Exactly. So the Kirov class was initially conceived, believe it or not, primarily as an anti-submarine platform. That's why they were originally armed with the SSN-14 anti-submarine missiles, long-range weapons designed specifically to hunt subs.
Huh. I wouldn't have guessed anti-sub was the main initial driver for ships this big, but that mission clearly expanded. They became much more about surface warfare.
Oh, absolutely. The focus shifted quite dramatically towards being able to hold American carrier strike groups at risk. That became maybe the primary mission.
And that explains the huge missile loadout we hear about.
Precisely. That shift led directly to them being fitted with 20, count them, 20 P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles. Huge, powerful missiles designed to take out carriers. The grand vision, the strategic thinking, was that these cruisers may be operating alongside nuclear-powered aircraft carriers the Soviets were planning.
Planned but never built, right?
Exactly, never built. But the idea was this combined force would give the Soviet Union serious global power projection, a blue water navy capable of challenging the U.S. anywhere.
Fascinating what if there with the carriers. And the Kirovs themselves had some pretty unique tech, like that propulsion system. CONUS, was it?
Yes, CONUS. Combined nuclear and steam. It's quite clever, really.
Yeah.
You have the nuclear reactors giving them almost unlimited range at cruising speed, like, the ultimate endurance.
Right.
But then for high-speed dashes, they have auxiliary steam turbines that kick in, powered by oil, to push them up to around 32 knots when needed. Best of both worlds, sort of.
Plus backups, you mentioned.
Yeah, they also included conventional boilers, just oil-fired boilers as a backup in case, God forbid, something went wrong with the reactors, a vital bit of redundancy.
Makes sense. And the whole design itself was used for another ship, too.
It was. The hull formed the basis for the SSV-33 Ural. That was a very large nuclear-powered command and control ship, kind of a spy ship, too. So the whole design proved versatile.
Interesting. So how many Kirovs actually got built? The plan was 5, but...
Yeah, 5 was the original plan, but things changed. Only 4 were actually completed and commissioned.
What happened to number 5?
The 5th one, which had various names proposed, including Fleet Admiral Kuznetsov, eventually. Well, its construction was stopped in 1990. The Cold War was ending, budgets were shrinking, it just never got finished and was eventually canceled.
Okay, so 4 made it into service. Can you give us a quick rundown of what happened to each of them?
Sure. The first one, the lead ship Kirov, commissioned in 1980, later renamed Admiral Ushakov, it had a pretty serious reactor accident in 1990. Yeah, after that, it was basically laid up in reserve for decades. There was talk of repairs, maybe bringing it back, but ultimately, in 2021, the decision was made to scrap it.
So the lead ship is gone. What about number 2?
Number 2 was Frunz, later renamed Admiral Lazarev. Commissioned in 1984, served in the Pacific Fleet, but it became inactive around 1994, just 10 years later, really, decommissioned officially in 1998.
So soon.
Yeah, and like its sister ship, it sat around for a long time. Scrapping finally started in April 2021, and they expect that to be done by late 2025.
Okay, so the first 2 are effectively out of the picture, being dismantled. What about the other 2, numbers 3 and 4?
Right. Number 3 is Kalinin, now called Admiral Nakhimov. Came into service in 1988 with the Northern Fleet. It was also inactive for a while, mothballed in 1999.
Seems like a pattern.
It does, but Nakhimov got a second chance. It was reactivated around 2005, and since 2015, it's been undergoing this massive modernization and overhaul program in Severodvinsk.
Ah, so this is the one being upgraded.
This is the one. But it's taking a long time. There have been delays. The current estimate for its return to service is, well, sometime in 2025, maybe. Part of the delay, reportedly, is Western sanctions making it harder to get certain, auxiliary systems, non-weapon components.
Right. Sanctions hitting even these huge military projects. That shows you how things are connected globally. And the last one, the 4th ship.
The 4th and final one is Yuri Andropov, which was commissioned much later, 1998. It was renamed Pyotr Veliki, Peter the Great, back in 1992, while still under construction.
And that's the one still active.
That's the one. It's currently the flagship of the Russian Northern Fleet. And as many point out, it holds the title of the largest active surface combatant, non-carrier in the world today.
Still sailing.
Yeah.
But wasn't there a report years ago about its reactor condition?
There was, yeah. Back in 2004, a report surfaced suggesting its reactor was in, let's say, extremely poor condition. But obviously, the ship has remained operational since then, so the exact situation is a bit unclear.
Okay, so recap. 4 built, 2 being scrapped, 1 undergoing a massive delayed refit, and 1 still operational as a flagship. Now, let's talk weapons. You said armed to the teeth, and the outline definitely backs that up.
Oh, yeah. That's not an exaggeration. Their main punch, the big hitters, are those 20 P-700 Granite anti-ship missiles, SSN-19 Shipwreck in NATO terms, designed specifically to kill carriers and other large warships.
20 of them. That's serious anti-ship capability. What about air defense? Got to protect themselves.
Absolutely. They have a layered defense. Long range is covered by the S-300F Fort system. That's the SAN-6 Grumble. Some ships got the upgraded S-300FM Fort M, the SAN-20 Gargoyle, even longer range, better capabilities.
Okay, the heavy hitters for air defense.
That's in for closer threats. They have systems like the 3K95 Kinzhal, SAN-9 Gauntlet, and the older OSM SAN-4 Gecko. The exact mix varied a bit between the ships, depending on when they were built or refitted.
So each one was slightly unique in its SAM fit.
Pretty much, yeah. Minor variations. And don't forget the anti-submarine missiles we mentioned earlier. The RKK-3 Metal, SSN-14 Silex, was on Kirov originally, and they also carried the RPK-2 Vyuga, SSN-15 Starfish, which are launched from torpedo tubes.
Guns. They must have guns too, right?
Oh, yes. Most of them carry the AK-130, a twin-barrel 130mm naval gun, very potent. Ushakov, Kirov, had older twin 100mm guns, the AK-100.
And for close-in defense, like last ditch.
Yeah, for that they had AK-630 Gatling guns, 30mm cannons, firing thousands of rounds a minute. The later ships, Nakhimov and Pyotr Veliki, got the Kadzan-1 Cortex system, which combines guns and short-range missiles in one mount. Very sophisticated close-in weapon system, or CIWS.
Wow. Missiles, guns, anti-sub... What else?
They also have standard 533mm torpedo tubes, which can launch anti-submarine or anti-surface torpedoes, and dedicated anti-submarine rocket launchers, the RBU-1000 and the UDOV-1 system. It's just a staggering amount of ordnance on one hull.
It really sounds like a floating fortress, a complete offensive and defensive package.
That's a good way to put it. That layered approach, from the long-range Granites down to the Cortex CIWS, makes them incredibly tough nuts to crack, theoretically at least.
And looking ahead, the modernized Nakhimov might get even newer stuff, hypersonic missiles.
That's the expectation, yes. Reports suggest that when Admiral Nakhimov finally rejoins the fleet, it will be capable of carrying the 3M22 Zircon hypersonic anti-ship missile.
Hypersonics. That's definitely cutting edge. Which brings us to the big question. Relevance. With all this firepower, even potential upgrades, how relevant are these ships today? One active, one may be coming back, two gone. Where do they fit?
That really is the multi-billion ruble question, isn't it? You've got Pyotr Veliki, operational flagship of the Northern Fleet, important role there. Then Nakhimov, as we said, undergoing this huge refit. It's supposed to get something like 174 vertical launch tubes.
174 VLS cells. That's a massive upgrade.
Huge. Capable of firing all sorts of missiles, anti-ship, land attack, anti-air. Plus, upgraded air defenses like the newer Fort M and Panzer M, and new anti-sub weapons like Packet NK and Otvet. It's intended to be a completely rejuvenated multi-mission platform.
If they can finish it, overcoming those delays and sanctions on parts.
Exactly. That's the big if. It highlights the challenge Russia faces just keeping these complex beasts running, let alone upgrading them. And this gets right to the heart of the debate about their modern relevance.
Okay, so what are the arguments for keeping them, for pouring resources into Nakhimov?
Well, proponents will point to that sheer firepower. Even the existing Granites and certainly future hypersonics pose a serious threat to high-value targets like carrier groups. You can't just ignore a ship like that.
Right. Deterrence value.
Yes. And there's symbolic value, too. They're symbols of Russian naval power, legacies of Soviet shipbuilding prowess. Plus, the potential for new tech like hypersonics could give them a renewed edge. And they make very imposing flagships, command centers for task forces.
Okay. And the arguments against. Why do some see them as, well, maybe not worth the cost?
The biggest factor of cost. Running nuclear-powered ships this size is incredibly expensive. Maintenance is a huge burden, especially, for a Navy that might be stretched financially.
Nuclear reactors aren't cheap to maintain.
Not at all. And then there's the strategic argument. Are these giant, expensive targets the best investment in an era where naval doctrine might be shifting towards smaller, more humorous ships, submarines, drones, asymmetric threats?
Relics of the Cold War argument.
Exactly. Some see them as magnificent, but ultimately dinosaurs from a different era of naval thinking. optimize for a superpower confrontation that looks different now.
It's a tough balance. Incredible potential power versus immense cost and maybe shifting strategic needs.
Yeah.
And there were also some worrying points in the sources about internal issues, corruption, maintenance problems.
Yes, unfortunately. That's another layer to consider. There was a pretty shocking case involving fraudulent contracts for overhauling Pyotr Veliky itself between 2010 and 2016.
What happened there?
Apparently, a fake company pretending to be part of the legitimate Zvezdochka shipyard won contracts. Money was embezzled, funds allocated for repairs just vanished, and little or no actual work was done.
On a nuclear battlecruiser.
Yeah.
A fake company got the repair contract. That's deeply concerning.
It really is. It raises serious questions about oversight and, well, potential systemic corruption that could impact readiness.
Does this link to wider concerns, like what happened with the Moskva cruiser in the Black Sea?
Well, while there aren't specific reports tying that kind of fraud directly to the Kirov's overall condition recently, the Moskva's sinking did bring Russian naval maintenance into the spotlight. Reports suggested deferred maintenance and maybe even poor construction contributed to its vulnerability and loss.
Right.
Now, you have to be careful drawing direct parallels. The Northern Fleet, where Pyotr Veliky and Nakhimov are based, is generally seen as a much higher priority. It's central to Russia's nuclear deterrent.
So potentially better maintained than the Black Sea Fleet.
Potentially, yes. You'd expect the flagships of the Northern Fleet to receive more resources and attention. But the Moskva incident and that fraud case with Pyotr Veliky's overhaul, they do serve as reminders that maintaining these complex, aging vessels is a huge challenge, and systemic issues can definitely exist.
Okay, so a complex picture all around. Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today. The naming, the history, the tech, the individual ship fates, and this ongoing debate about their future.
We have the Kirov-Class cruisers. They're really fascinating. Symbols of a past era, undeniably powerful, but facing, the tough realities of the 21st century Navy. Their whole story touches on Cold War strategy, post-Soviet challenges, the sheer difficulty of maintaining such advanced warships.
So wrapping up this deep dive, here's something for you, our listener, to ponder. Given the huge costs, the logistical hurdles of keeping these nuclear giants going, the modernization challenges, especially with sanctions and potential internal issues, and considering how naval warfare itself is changing, what does the future realistically hold for Pyotr Veliky and Admiral Nakhimov? And maybe more broadly, what does the story of the Kirov-class tell us about naval power, about prestige versus practicalities in the modern world?
That's a great question to think about. And hey, if this exploration of the Kirov-class has fired up your curiosity, if you're hungry for more deep dives into, well, all sorts of fascinating topics,
then become part of our All Sorts podcast community.
Exactly. Please like, share, and definitely subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss what's coming next.
Check out our archives, too. Tons of great stuff there. And keep the conversation going with us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We love hearing your thoughts.
You really do.
Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until our next exploration here on the All Sorts podcast, keep questioning, keep learning, keep that curiosity alive.